I'm Daniel Goleman. I'm best known for writing Emotional Intelligence. I've written many other books since. My job is to translate from scientific academic literature useful information that has to do with our lives, particularly from psychology, behavioral science, neuroscience. My professional background is in psychology. I have a doctorate in that field, and I'm pretty much a generalist. I worked for the New York Times for about 12 years covering the field.
Now, what was your entree into the emotional intelligence work? I mean, where did it come from?
So I stumbled upon emotional intelligence when I was a science journalist at the New York Times. My job really was to read the academic literature and journals as it came out, and to find what was new, interesting, had consequence for people's lives, and then to translate it into a format that would work in a newspaper. And I stumbled across this very interesting article in 1990 in a journal that's so obscure it doesn't even exist anymore. And it was titled Emotional Intelligence. I thought, that is a fabulous concept. And I used it in an article I wrote on emotional literacy, which is a very new idea back then. That article on emotional intelligence was written by Peter Salovey, who's now the president of Yale University. He was a junior psychologist back then. And his, I think, then graduate student, Jack Mayer, who's now at the University of New Hampshire, they have their model of emotional intelligence that positions it as an intelligence like IQ. I've taken the model in a different area that's more useful for coaches, more useful for HR, for understanding competencies at work. It's a model that looks at the brain system underlying self-awareness, self-management, which has to do really with how the prefrontal cortex can modulate the emotional centers. And then at a different set of neural circuitry, which has been discovered recently in social neuroscience, which has to do with our capacity for empathy, for having effective relationships. And from that neural basis, I posit 4 modules: self-awareness, self-management, empathy, social skill. And within each of those, embedded within each, are competencies that you see demonstrated on the job in the most successful people, in star performers. That's what competence models capture.
And it's just expanding, as I understand it, and expanding it. The efficacy and the applicability to coaches is just, it's impossible to overstate,
well,
I think.
And then after writing emotional intelligence and then translating it into the competency framework, which I did in working with emotional intelligence and follow-up articles, as I was doing that, the profession of coaching emerged. And it struck me, hey, this is a model that's perfect for that profession, because it gives you a concrete way to talk to clients about what they do, what the best people do, and how to fill that gap, what you can do to improve. And in my writings, I'd always said that the best way to undertake building competencies is with a coach.
Mm-hmm. So the material and the coaching profession kind of grew together.
It was a nice synchrony.
It is. What is your current work, and where has it evolved to now?
Well, my most recent book is called Focus, and it looks at how attention is at play within emotional intelligence, and certainly is a key to performance. No attention, no performance. Great attention, great performance. And what interferes with that, how we can build it, the different kinds of focus and how that matters. Inner focus, which has to do with self-awareness, self-management, focusing on others, that's empathy and social skill. And then a third ability, which is context awareness, understanding the systems within which we're operating, how they affect what we're doing, how they constrain it, how they open possibilities. I wrote, after Focus, a book called The Triple Focus, which is on education. I did it with Peter Senge, who is known for his work with the Learning Organization. And Peter and I saw that SEL, which is the way emotional intelligence has been translated into school curricula, social emotional learning, is completely complementary with what he's been working on, which is systems learning, teaching kids how to understand systems. If you put them together, you've got a triple focus for kids.
Can you talk a little bit about how you train focus and what some of the techniques are?
Well, there's a wide range of techniques for cultivating focus. For inner focus, adaptations of meditation really are attention training. You can do it for concentration. You can do it for mindfulness, which is a more flexible awareness, a more panoramic awareness. You can do it in the interpersonal domain by cultivating positive attitudes of concern and caring, for example, that make you more likely to be there for other people, to be a good team member, to be a good leader, and so on. So there are different ways for cultivating different varieties of focus.
Okay. What do you think is going to be next? Do you know?
Well, I know my next book is I'm writing for the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday.
Oh, wow.
I interviewed him for several hours about his vision for humanity. It's called Be a Force for Good. It'll be out in July 2015 when he turns 80.
Where do you see the boundaries or the edges, growing edges would be my word, for emotional intelligence and focus and these modalities for coaches? Where's it going?
In the book with Sangye and in my book Focus, we talk about the three areas in which I believe growth is occurring and is very positive. One is including attention and attention training, mindfulness, as part of working with our self-awareness, with managing our inner world and with the change, and also empathy and social skill. I see in that domain adding this cultivation of compassion, if you will, as the next step. And then also adding to that understanding systems, pattern recognition, being able to see how systems dynamics are at work in our interpersonal relationships, in our organizational life, and also in the ethos or ecology within which every organization exists.
That's absolutely fascinating. It's to me, having grown up with the profession of coaching after coming out of a different career, to hear that the emphasis has now come back to self-awareness and self-management, and those are my favorite terms in this, is just such an enormous, I never thought it would get there. I just didn't. And it's coming.
Yeah, I never thought anyone would pay attention to emotional intelligence, so
I actually,
quite surprised.
personally, am very attached to an earlier book of yours, Vital Lies, Simple Truths, which I've been using forever. And I love the earlier versions of how information comes in and gets sorted, and just have been fascinating.
Well, I began to write a book on attention in the 1980s, and there wasn't much research on attention. But I got very interested in a pathology of attention, which is self-deception and groupthink and collusion, which I think are enormous problems at every level, individual and collective. And that's why I wrote Vital Lies, Simple Truths.
If you were to talk to our coaches and give them some advice about how they could continue to better themselves, continue to learn new technique, continue to focus, what might you suggest?
Well, I think that any coach would do well to cultivate a daily practice of meditation and loving kindness, for example, because it will help a coach. It helps you be present, tune in, empathize, form rapport with your client, and that can only help.